Thank you. Nice to see you all. So, I guess I better make sure we're good to go. We're good, okay. So, stumbled on some scriptures that made me want to share a message on darkness and light, especially light. And we'll see where that gets us for today. The light is a good place to go. I'll start there. So if I can start with Genesis chapter 1, verses 1 through 5. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good. And then God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, the darkness he called night, and the evening and the morning were the first day. So right from the very beginning, there was a distinction between light and darkness. I mean, it only makes sense to us now, but there had to be a beginning. With the darkness at the time, there was an emptiness, a void. And I think oftentimes darkness today comes with that same void, that same emptiness. But the light is good. And it wasn't long, if we continue reading, that we learned this was about much more than what we can see, much more than just what's visible. In Proverbs chapter 4, verse 18 and 19, King Solomon tells us, "But the path of the just is as the shining light that shineth more and more unto the perfect day. The way of the wicked is as darkness. They know not at what they stumble." So now that visible light, now we're talking about wickedness, and we're talking about just or goodness a little bit more, getting away from the visible and into our human character. Isaiah chapter 60 is the next one I'd like to go to. I guess 1 through 3. "Arise, shine, for thy light is come, and the glory of the Lord is risen upon thee. For behold, the darkness shall cover the earth, and gross darkness the people. But the Lord shall arise upon thee, and his glory shall be seen upon thee. And the Gentiles shall come to thy light, and kings to the brightness of thy rising." So we've got so much more power now in the light as we read this. It's attractive. It brings people in. In this case, the Gentiles, way back in Isaiah, talking about the light attracting the Gentiles. Darkness comes in many forms. It could be the ways of the world. We all see that every day around us. It could be pure evil. It could even be law and judgment. If you've ever experienced someone being very judgmental, that can get pretty dark pretty quick. But the true light of Christ, it brings peace and it brings rest. And it sheds and shares that light wherever it's brought forth. I don't know if I should have written a definition for this, but I believe some have defined light as an absence of darkness. Something to think about. So the light can be brought forth in so many ways. I can tell you one way that it can't be brought forth is by force. Now I'm speaking of light in terms of our human character. And again, that light is attractive. But how do we win people over, whether it's to Christ or just in our general exchange of ideas? Do we win people over by browbeating and condemnation and judgment? Certainly not. That turns people away. We win people by attractive fruits. Peace, the kind of peace that passes all understanding that the Bible spoke about. That makes people wonder when they see someone who's got this peace, what is it about that person? They want to know more. Grace, joy, All these things are there and perceivable when someone walks with that light of Christ without judgment and condemnation towards other people. So it's all there and perceivable in the midst of the darkness of this world. And I think wherever that light goes, the darkness fades away more and more with each person. If we can go to John chapter 1, 1 through 9. This should be pretty familiar. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. The same came for a witness, to bear witness of the light, that all men through him might believe. He was not that light, but he was sent to bear witness of that light. That was the true light, which lighteth every man that cometh into the world. So every man, every woman, every child can be lit by that light. The only choice we have to make is basically to come to that light. We'll get into that a little bit further on. What can lift man from darkness, though the world will not understand it? There's plenty of darkness in the world. I guess there always has been, and it can be overwhelming. And it can bring us down, but what can lift us up? I'm sure we all know people who fail to understand us and our faith. I can think of plenty, unfortunately. And that's because Christ and our faith, it's not natural. It's not of a worldly understanding. It is supernatural. And the supernatural is very hard for just people to understand day in and day out. So that true light, what is it? It's Christ. It is Christ that can lift someone up from the darkness. And there are numerous scriptures where it talks about Christ lifting people up, never putting them down. So again, that does not make sense to people who are not a part of it. But perhaps if they see peace and they see grace and they see joy as opposed to law and judgment and darkness, they will want to know more. And I've had people say things just trying to understand, my family or things that we talk about and do or whatever, just the peace that's in our house by God's grace, and they don't understand it. They want to know more. And that's a blessing. But we have to remember who we are and what is given to us in order for that light to be seen. And if we can go to John chapter 12, verse 35 and 36, we'll get back into Christ now talking to his apostles. Then Jesus said unto them, Yet a little while is the light with you. Walk while you have the light, lest darkness come upon you. For he that walketh in darkness knoweth not whither he goeth. While ye have light, believe in the light, that ye may be children of the light. These things spake Jesus, and then he departed, and he did hide himself from them, which is interesting. He was walking right there with him, and then he hid himself. And to most of us, I think maybe all of us, Christ is perhaps hidden as far as physically seeing him right next to you, but he is there in our hearts with the Holy Spirit, and that light is there in our lives. We need to walk in that light, not the darkness, and then we can be children of the light as we already are, and it's important to remember that and know who you are. While the light is with you, he said. Remember also the Lord said, I believe it is in Deuteronomy, I will never leave nor forsake you. So even though Christ hid himself, he did not leave us. Philippians chapter 2, please, 14 and 15. So we have to, there's a little bit of thinking about this. I mean, we could carry ourselves in so many ways. We could carry ourselves in ways that give a chance for people to maybe see some darkness. And we're human after all, so none of us are perfect. But in Philippians, we're guided a little bit. Do all things without murmurings and disputings, that ye may be blameless and harmless, the sons of God, without rebuke in the midst of a crooked and perverse nation, among whom ye shine as lights in the world. It doesn't say rebuke from who. It could be from other people, perhaps from the Lord, but I think it's in reference to the people around us where we are shining our light, hopefully. When we murmur and complain, we descend into that darkness. We look like the rest of the world. We do not shine. Instead, we fade. Now, this doesn't mean that we can't stand up for nor defend ideas, principles, people, etc., but how we do so is crucial. An honest rebuke or something can be done without offending the person. People are important. Ideas come and go. Remember, we want our peace, our representation of Christ to be attractive. A good friend of mine once told me, you may be the only Bible some person reads. So they may not be getting the word, but they're getting the word perhaps filtered through you and what they see in your lives and our lives. 1 Thessalonians, please, chapter 5, verses 2 through 5. For yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so cometh as a thief in the night. But ye, brethren, are not in darkness, that that day should overtake you as a thief. Ye are all children of the light and the children of the day. We are not of the night, nor of the darkness. So again, though we may see that darkness all around us, we must still find the joy of salvation, the joy of Christ, His grace. His grace is contagious. This is the grace which allows us to be forgiven. And it's the grace that allows us to forgive our brother 70 times 70 and so on. I'm sure that could have said infinity. Yet the number of 7 is completeness, right? Okay, so now I'm down to my last set of verses, and these are the ones that inspired me to want to give this message. I have side-by-side King James and Amplified Bible, and I'm sure you've all noticed it, but even among the various versions of the Amplified, they're worded differently. So this particular version that I have, I really appreciated the way that they worded this, and this is Ephesians chapter 5, 8 through 14. For once you were darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Walk as children of light. Lead the lives of those native born to the light. For the fruit of the light, or the Spirit, consists in every form of kindly goodness, uprightness of heart, and trueness of life. Again, attractive fruit. And try to learn in your experience what is pleasing to the Lord. Let your lives be constant proofs of what is most acceptable to Him. Take no part in and have no fellowship with the fruitless deeds and enterprises of darkness, but instead let your lives be so in contrast as to expose and reprove and convict them. For it is a shame even to mention the things that such people practice in secret. But when anything is exposed and reproved by the light, it is made visible and clear. And where everything is visible and clear, there is light. Therefore he says, Awake, O sleeper, and arise from the dead, and Christ shall shine as dawn upon you and give you light. Notice it says, take no part. Don't have fellowship with the fruitless deeds and enterprises. It doesn't say take no part in those people, because people who are perhaps in darkness are the ones we need to bring to the light. If we only talk to those who are in the light who know Christ, what's to happen to these other people? Our hope is to bring them over. But walking in the light and shedding light on the world around us, contrasting with the darkness and thereby exposing the darkness and its emptiness and its evil. I don't think this has to be done consciously. Indeed, I believe it's much more effective when it's done unconsciously. And it all hinges upon our identity in Christ, knowing who we are and what has been given to us, and by none of our effort. We only must choose again to come to that light. It is finished. Christ said it himself. The work is done. We only need to labor to enter his rest. Paul spoke of that. When we can enter his rest, that is where we find that peace and that light, the peace that passes all understanding. When we enter his rest, then our light will shine, and people will wonder, and they'll want to know more. And hopefully they will ask you the reason for your joy. And we can tell them it's Jesus.